Miss Mimi Parthasarathy, founder and managing director Sinhasi Consultants, made the inaugural address. She spoke about the Sinhasi Social Impact Initiative program having started as part of the social responsibility element of the 360-degree financial and life plans. This Conference 1 focuses on wildlife, nature, and climate change. This conference pays tribute to the late Mr. M.A. Parthasarathy, Miss Mimi's father, who was a pioneer in nature conservation discussions and efforts. The aim is to sensitize individuals and corporates to the link between nature conservation and climate change and bring greater awareness to the pressing environmental concerns of today and make this an important part of their social responsibility agenda. The conference also emphasizes the importance of integrating traditional wisdom with modern science for sustainable wildlife and nature conservation. Curated initiatives and NGOs working in the space of wildlife conservation and environmental protection are showcased at the conference. Professor Madhav Gadgil, Padma Shri and Padma Bhushan, globally renowned ecologist and head of the 2010 Gadgil Commission for the Western Ghats Ecology Expert Panel, spoke about covering 6 decades in conservation in India. Professor Gadgil highlights the importance of resilience and personal background in commitment to conservation efforts. He stresses bridging the gap between the elite conservationists and the common people and advocates for genuine engagement with local communities and a grassroots approach to conservation. He calls for rethinking elephant captivity practices and exploring more humane models. Professor Gadgil was very vocal about the importance of conserving our existing forests and nature for our future. Mr. Romulus Whitaker, Padma Shri awardee, globally renowned herpetologist, wildlife conservationist, founder of the Madras Crocodile Bank Trust, and founder Agumbe Rainforest Research Station, Karnataka, spoke about how conservation must become a movement in India. Mr. Romulus highlighted the origins of India's conservation movement in the mid-1970s, crediting the late Mr. M.A. Parthasarathy for its momentum. He urged young individuals to consider careers in wildlife and nature conservation over more conventional paths like engineering or IT. He also emphasized the need for passionate individuals to step up and protect the planet, particularly in the face of challenges like climate change. Mr. Romulus acknowledged the importance of financial stability in conservation work while expressing optimism about increasing opportunities in this field. He also stressed the growing recognition of the value of preserving nature, indicating positive trends in job security for those pursuing conservation careers. Professor Raman Sukumar, senior ecologist, National Science Chairperson at Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and Vice Chair at the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, set the context for the Social Impact Initiative Conference 1. He had a long-time association and respect for the late M.A. Parthasarathy, dating back to Project Tiger in 1973. Professor Sukumar advocates a holistic approach to conservation, which involves conflict resolution, habitat preservation, and sustainable development. He spoke about the importance of the late Mr. M.A. Parthasarathy's manifesto and stressed the importance of protection of biodiversity, environmental education, human rights, and integrating traditional knowledge into conservation actions. He advocates a shift from the traditional protected area-based conservation model to a landscape-based approach. Professor Sukumar highlighted the need to consider development models that prioritize sustainability and coexistence over exclusive conservation. Mr. Ravi Singh, Secretary General and CEO at World Wildlife Fund, India, spoke about raising awareness and finance in conservation. He emphasizes the need and necessity of merging finance and sustainability to address critical environmental challenges. Mr. Singh advocates that corporates and individuals must consider long-term financial commitment in wildlife conservation and climate change initiatives. He also highlights the interdependence of water supply, industrial operations, and technological advancements with the crucial role of nature in supporting human activities. He expresses optimism about India's growing understanding of nature conservation's importance and its potential for global leadership. Mr. Singh calls for heightened awareness among corporate professionals regarding the urgency of addressing climate change, environmental issues, and biodiversity loss. Curated initiatives and NGOs, presentations and details about their work. Mr. Chiranjeev Singh, Chairman, AME Foundation, retired IAS officer, Government of Karnataka, and former ambassador of India to UNESCO, spoke about ecological agriculture and eco-farming for improved ecological balances. Mr. Chiranjeev Singh emphasizes the vital role of ecological agriculture and eco-farming in maintaining ecological balances. He emphasizes on the web of life and discussed the deep interconnectedness between nature and agriculture, recognizing their mutual influence on environmental health. He highlights the concerning decline in insect populations and emphasizes its potential far-reaching impact on our ecosystem and agricultural productivity. Mr. Chiranjeev Singh advocates a holistic approach to conservation, integrating sustainable farming practices and addressing employment challenges in rural areas. He also mentions the efforts of the Agricultural Man and Ecological Foundation, or AME, in advancing sustainable agriculture and disseminating success models and experiences through publications like Lisa India magazine. Mr. Singh emphasizes that it is imperative to re-evaluate the concept of development in light of climate change and biodiversity loss, recognizing the inextricable link between development and conservation efforts. Ms. Suparna Ganguly and Dr. Sheila Rao, co-founders and trustees of Wildlife Rescue and Rehabilitation Center, WRRC, and Compassion Unlimited Plus Action, CUPA, spoke about captive elephants and rescue and rehabilitation of wild animals. Mrs. Suparna Ganguly and Dr. Sheila Rao discussed the rescue and rehabilitation of wild animals, particularly in the context of urbanization and development. WRRC, established in 1999, focuses on the welfare of urban wildlife adversely affected by rapid urbanization and development. They highlighted their extensive work in rescuing and rehabilitating a variety of animals, including snakes, lorises, tortoises, and parakeets, underscoring the critical need for public awareness and support for wildlife conservation. Most importantly, they addressed the pressing issue of captive elephants in India, drawing attention to their subpar living conditions and inadequate training methods, and emphasized the need for better policies and forest department involvement to ensure their well-being. They advocated the urgent need for proper training of mahouts and for the provision of mental health support for individuals working with elephants. WRRC challenged the conventional belief that keeping elephants in captivity is essential for cultural or religious reasons, pointing to studies indicating that devotees may not necessarily miss the presence of elephants in temples. They advocated for a re-evaluation of the way elephants are kept in captivity, proposing more humane models that prioritize the animal's well-being and strive to replicate natural wild conditions. They also highlighted the urgent need to address the welfare of elephants and other captive wildlife, calling for heightened awareness, government intervention, and improved policies to ensure a more humane and sustainable future for these majestic creatures. Dr. Nishant Srinivasaya, behavioral ecologist and a PhD from the National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore, spoke about the millennial male elephant under pressure. Dr. Nishant focused on the changing behavior of the male elephant in response to rapid urbanization, highlighting its impact on human-elephant conflicts. He emphasizes the crucial importance of long-term monitoring, especially of male elephants, in understanding and mitigating the challenges posed by rapid changing environments. He advocates for the use of technology as a valuable tool for efficient data collection, which can inform more effective conservation efforts. Dr. Nishant recognizes the agency of individual elephants and emphasizes their integral role within the ecosystem, emphasizing the need to incorporate this understanding into conservation strategies. He addresses the significant challenge of elephants coming into conflict with human activities and agriculture, emphasizing the necessity for collaborative efforts involving various stakeholders, including the corporate sector. He also highlights the urgency of reducing elephant mortalities and captivity through concerted efforts, emphasizing the vital role of collaboration between researchers, conservationists, and stakeholders in achieving this goal. Mr. Sanjay Ajanikar, Program Director, and Mr. Amlan Aditya Goswami, Researcher from the Asian Nature Conservation Foundation, spoke about tech and culture in elephant conservation. Sanjay and Amlan from ANCF focused on challenges in the Golaghat district, Assam, arising from human-elephant conflicts. They emphasized the urgency of implementing an early warning system utilizing GPS collars for tracking elephant movements and making strategic investments in physical barriers to mitigate conflicts. They advocated for the preservation of local culture through the integration of technology, recognizing its significance in maintaining harmonious relationships between humans and elephants. They addressed the critical issue of elephant-train collisions, highlighting the need for targeted interventions and technologies to reduce such incidents. Sanjay and Amlan stressed the importance of employing a multidisciplinary approach in conservation efforts, acknowledging that solutions require collaborations across various fields and expertise. They mentioned an initiative encouraging farmers to allocate a portion of their fields for elephants to feed on during harvest, though acknowledging the associated challenges in implementing this approach effectively. Dr. Tarsh Tekekara, conservationist, trustee of the Shola Trust Gudlur and co-founder of the Real Elephant Collective, spoke about the coexistence and the global trotting lantana elephants. Dr. Tarsh addresses the pressing issue of the invasive lantana shrubs in the South Indian forests. He points out that despite historical efforts to eradicate lantana, it remains a pervasive problem covering nearly 40% of South Indian national parks and forests and disrupting the ecosystem. He advocates for a more comprehensive approach to lantana management, which includes mechanical removal, the creation of value chains from lantana, and the adoption of traditional controlled fires. Dr. Tarsh emphasizes the importance of integrating traditional knowledge into modern conservation practices, recognizing the value of indigenous wisdom in addressing ecological challenges. He stresses the removal of lantana is a slow process with ecological trade-offs. He also emphasizes that it is essential for restoring native habitats, for mitigating conflicts, and fostering coexistence between humans and wildlife in the South Indian forests. Mr. Avinash Krishnan, wildlife biologist and director, Arosha, India, spoke about a forest in Bangalore city, Banirghata 560083. Forgotten forests, fragile fences. Mr. Avinash addresses conservation challenges in the Banirghata National Park landscape, which is in the city limits of Bangalore, India. He highlights the rich biodiversity of the area, which includes elephants, leopards, tigers, and the numerous other species, showcasing the ecological significance of Banirghata National Park. He discusses pressing issues such as human-elephant conflicts and degraded habitats, emphasizing the urgency of addressing these concerns for the well-being of both wildlife and local communities. He points out the crucial role of Banirghata National Park as a vital carbon emission absorber for all Bangalorean citizens and corporates, contributing significantly to the city's climate regulation. He advocates and stressed the need for citizen engagement and stresses the importance of collaborative efforts among various organizations and institutions to preserve the unique natural heritage of Banirghata National Park. Mr. Avinash also calls for an integrated, holistic approach to conservation, emphasizing the need for collective action to protect Banirghata and its invaluable ecosystems for future generations. Ms. Harshita Venkatesh, Project Lead BPAC Be Green Initiative, Bangalore Political Action Committee, spoke about urban forestry, greening Bangalore city. Ms. Harshita, along with Ms. Mimi Parthasarathi, who is also a senior member of BPAC, highlighted the mission of BPAC and also spoke about how initially it focused on addressing unmanaged garbage in Bangalore city over a decade ago. They spoke about BPAC being founded a decade ago as a platform for public-private participation to address various issues faced by Bangaloreans. This platform was set up by Mrs. Kiran Mazumdar Shah and Mr. Mohandas Pai, and also garnered support from major companies like Infosys and Wipro. Harshita spoke about BPAC today having evolved into a very dynamic platform for civic engagement with a special emphasis on public-private participation to tackle a range of urban issues in Bangalore. BPAC operates under 6 key verticals, placing a strong emphasis on environmental sustainability through the Be Green initiative. BPAC is vocal about the critical importance of urban sustainability in the face of Bangalore's population growth and diminishing green spaces. Harshita also emphasizes BPAC's dedication to fostering environmental sustainability through awareness-raising, eco-friendly practices and community engagement, encouraging active participation from citizens, political leaders, and government authorities. Building a two-way science platform. The importance of integrating science with traditional techniques and wisdom for sustainable wildlife conservation. Ms. Hamsini Bijlani, Senior Ecologist and Field Research Biologist, Environs Kimberley, Broome, Western Australia, spoke about the importance of integrating Indigenous Aboriginal ecological practices with science in Western Australia. Hamsini's research focuses on the Aboriginal Australian ranger groups in northwestern Australia, highlighting the importance of their contribution to conservation efforts. She advocates the importance of integrating traditional Indigenous knowledge with modern scientific approaches in conservation, emphasizing the value of combining these two perspectives. She highlights the success of the Indigenous Ranger Network in managing Indigenous protected areas, emphasizing their significant role in ecological preservation. Hamsini describes the Great Sandy Desert Fire and Biodiversity Project, which aims to understand traditional fire patterns and their impact on biodiversity in the remotest of areas of northwestern Australia, showcasing the practical application of combining research with traditional knowledge in fire management, which has become a very big issue globally today. She addresses the challenges of integrating traditional knowledge into conservation practices and also notes the gradual recognition of its importance in contemporary conservation efforts. Hamsini also mentions the role of the recent wildfires seen in Australia and its management in shifting perceptions about traditional land management practices, underlining the evolving understanding of the value of Indigenous practices in fire management and conservation. Dr. Sharat Chandra Lele, Distinguished Fellow in Environmental Policy and Governance at the Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and the Environment, spoke about the Forest Rights Act and forest conservation. Dr. Lele acknowledges the late M.A. Parthasarathy's profound influence on his transition from engineering to environmental studies. He emphasizes the crucial lesson that true conservation is unattainable if individuals lead unsustainable lifestyles, underlining the role of climate change driven by high consumption patterns. He highlights the imperative to address the colonial and undemocratic history of conservation in India, advocating for a deeper, more inclusive process for conservation efforts. Dr. Lele discusses the Forest Rights Act, designed to rectify historic injustices and acknowledge the democratic rights of forest-dwelling communities. He advocates for the effective implementation of the Forest Rights Act and stresses the importance of democratizing conservation efforts to achieve sustainable and just environmental policies. He also addresses the resistance to the Forest Rights Act and its connections to the concept of forest conservation, emphasizing the need to overcome such barriers. He spoke about the need for the empowerment of local communities and the democratization of conservation efforts, recognizing their pivotal role in sustainable environmental policies. Dr. Lele calls for a coalition between Adivasis and the forest rights advocates and conservationists, highlighting the shared goals of sustainable environmental policies and just conservation practices. Dr. Nitin Rai, political ecologist and independent scholar, spoke about tiger conservation, reality and myths. Dr. Nitin examines the political ecology surrounding tiger conservation, critiquing the fortress conservation approach for its exclusion of local communities, which can lead to displacement and alienation. He expresses skepticism about the scientific validity of claims of increasing tiger populations in areas employing the fortress conservation approach. He raises concerns about market-driven conservation strategies that assign economic values to ecosystem services, potentially resulting in the commodification of landscapes and associated rights. Dr. Rai spoke about the need for the re-evaluation of conservation practices, emphasizing the critical importance of preserving the cultural and ecological connections between communities and their respective landscapes. He highlights the role of Grama Sabhas, local self-governing bodies, in resisting development activities that may have adverse effects on conservation efforts and local communities. Dr. Rai calls for the empowerment of local communities through initiatives like the Forest Rights Act, recognizing their essential role in sustainable and just conservation practices. Dr. Siddhappa Shetty, ethnobotanist and professor at the Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and the Environment, spoke about the success of the Forest Rights Act with the Soliga tribes in BRT tiger reserves. He highlights the Soliga tribal community's deep understanding of their forest environment in the Biligiri Rangaswamy Temple BRT Tiger Reserve and how it contributes to sustainable resource management. He emphasizes the significance of land tenure in empowering local communities and showcasing initiatives like participatory resource monitoring, sustainable non-timber forest product harvesting, organic farming, and enterprise development. Dr. Shetty discusses the challenges posed by invasive species like lantana and emphasizes the need for evidence-based conservation practices to address such issues. He advocates for community participation and co-management as essential factors in preserving biodiversity and improving livelihoods in the BRT Tiger Reserve. He shares his experience in the BRT Hills, where the Forest Rights Act has been successfully implemented for over 2,000 families, leading to positive outcomes in conservation and community empowerment. Dr. Shetty highlights the importance of workshops and education in helping communities understand and engage with the Forest Rights Act, emphasizing its role in securing their rights and enhancing their involvement in conservation efforts. Dr. Tarun Chabra, senior ecologist, ethnobotanist, a practicing doctor, author, a Todas expert, spoke about the Toda culture and their bond with nature even today. He founded the Toda Sangam and the EBR Center Trust to preserve the cultural heritage and environment of the Toda people in the Nilgiri highlands. Notable initiatives include the conservation of the endangered Toda buffalo breed and the authorship of the Toda landscape explanations in cultural ecology. He highlights the profound bond between the Todas and nature, emphasizing their sustainable practices, spiritual connection with the environment, and unique ecological knowledge. He emphasizes the critical importance of ecological preservation and cultural conservation to ensure the continuation of the Toda way of life for future generations. Dr. Chabra's work stands as a testament to the significance of preserving indigenous cultures and their intimate relationship with the natural world, exemplifying how such efforts contribute to both cultural heritage and environmental conservation. The importance of communication and campaigns in conservation. Mr. Vance G. Martin, internationally renowned nature conservationist and former president of the Wild Foundation, Boulder, Colorado, spoke about a global perspective to rewilding for conservation. He advocates for the protection and restoration of wild nature and emphasizes that at least 50% of the ecosystems should be preserved for the earth to continue providing life support according to scientific indications. Mr. Vance introduces the concept of rewilding with core principles of health, heritage, and hope, emphasizing reciprocity in the human-nature relationship. He discusses the work of the Global Rewilding Alliance and emphasizes the importance of including indigenous rights in conservation efforts. He also highlights the often overlooked role of wildlife in carbon sequestration, a crucial factor in climate models. Mr. Vance's presentation conveys a message of positivity, hope, and the transformative power of rewilding for a more sustainable and promising future. Mr. Paul Spencer, former Communications Director, WWF International, author and communications consultant from Geneva, Switzerland, spoke about the need for effective communication for success in conservation efforts. Mr. Paul, a writer, conservationist, and communications advisor, stresses the critical role of effective communication in conservation efforts. He advocates for optimism, action, and the mobilization of social movement as essential components in addressing environmental challenges. He points out notable achievements in conservation, including the establishment of multinational treaties and the recognition of nature's rights in national constitutions. Mr. Paul highlights the intricacies of conservation communication, including the challenge of framing environmental issues and avoiding the dissemination of false narratives. He emphasizes the significance of understanding one's audience, establishing intimacy, and striking a balance between providing factual information and engaging emotional storytelling. Mr. Paul introduces the 4 motivators for direct marketing in conservation efforts: greed, exclusivity, fear, and guilt, providing distinct approaches to engaging supporters. Mrs. Swarna Ramki, Managing Trustee, Conservation India, spoke about effective information data systems and campaigns for focused conservation efforts. Mrs. Swarna details the organization's evolution and commitment to supporting nature conservation through the dissemination of reliable information and collaborative efforts. She emphasizes the challenge of effectively communicating conservation initiatives, leading to the establishment of Conservation India over 15 years ago to address the absence of a centralized repository for conservation information in India. She illustrates how Conservation India has transitioned into a facilitator of wildlife conservation, engaging with diverse stakeholders, conducting impactful campaigns, and advocating for policy reforms. Her colleague, Mr. Vikram, a dedicated volunteer with Conservation India, highlights the successful Amur Falcon campaign, underscoring the importance of comprehending local politics, policies, and procedures in conservation endeavors. They introduce Conservation India's comprehensive framework for initiating, planning, collaborating, enabling, and monitoring conservation projects, emphasizing the meticulous planning and coordination required for successful outcomes. Mrs. Swarna stresses the significance of patience, perseverance, and collaborative efforts in conservation work, recognizing that meaningful impact often requires time and focused action. She shares specific success stories in conservation campaigns such as the Amur falcons in Nagaland and the Narcondam hornbill in the Andamans, showcasing Conservation India's practical achievements.